Budapest, 1984, the small hours of a freezing December night, but I was out of bed and at the window. A sound had torn me from sleep. It's just a train, I know, but in my mind I had travelled back more than 28 years to a few October days in this same city. As a 7-year-old, I could scarcely comprehend the strange and dramatic events that were taking place. Hungary was in revolt against communism.
8 years earlier, when I was 6 months pregnant with our first child, my 25-year-old husband, István, was sentenced to 2 years in the jail. His crime, that he was the leader of the Catholic youth group that helped young apprentices, for he was accused of being a spy. István never confessed to these fabricated charges, and he left prison after almost 2 years in 1950.
The early days of the uprising were bloody, and my parents nearly lost their lives outside Parliament House in what became known as the Kossuth Square massacre.
We fortunate that my mother lived with us, as she minded the children while we went into Budapest. We have to go back to work, and I will never forget sight of my mother waving to us for as long as she could see us, not knowing what waiting us in Budapest or have safe our families would be during our absence. Would we ever see each other again?
A few days of euphoria were ended by Soviet tanks sent to crush the uprising. For me, it was the beginning of a long journey that would eventually lead to Canberra. My parents both realised that my father would be targeted again after the revolution. He didn't want to leave, but my mother was adamant that they should leave for his sake and for the children's future. Escape was not easy. The border with Austria was quickly closed, but there were still opportunities of getting into Yugoslavia. A few days after Christmas, the Doszpot family, my father, mother, grandmother Barbara, myself, and my young sister Anna and baby brother Gus made our way to the Yugoslav border and set out across the snow. We travelled by sleigh until we approached the border. Then we had to walk. It was bitterly cold, the snow was drifting, and we could not carry anything. It was just a few weeks after Christmas, and all I could take with me was a new raincoat and a favourite Meccano spanner. I had to discard these along the way in the knee-deep snow as we barely managed to keep going in the dead of night. I have no doubt that had we been caught, my father would have been executed.
We arrived at Tuggeranong, a small village at the Yugoslavia border, and all separated it from Hungary was a railway line. Airtime in Yugoslavian refugees camp was very difficult, except with 3 young children. Our group of 600 refugees was first taken to old grain warehouse, and my husband and I had to stay awake at night to protect our children from the hundreds of rats that we shared our living place with.
To me, the hardships of life in refugee camps was not evident as a child. It was a great adventure, and episodes are still fresh in my mind as being a happy time. We arrived in Sydney by boat on September 17th, 1957, and unlike many of the other refugees, we didn't have to go to a migrant hostel, as friends of my parents, Belo Osatsky and his sons, Albert and Stephen, made us very welcome in their house in Annandale. My mother and father worked almost day and night at various jobs to save a deposit for their own house. In mid-1958, their dream came true as we moved into what they called our castle, 5 Short Street, Leichhardt. I grew up in Leichhardt, and my childhood is full of happy memories, and the 60s and 70s were eventful. My father became a strong St George Budapest soccer fan, and like with thousands of other immigrants and refugees, soccer played a significant role in our assimilation into our new homeland. After my school years, I started my career in sales and marketing, and in 1974 I was posted to Canberra. And it was only then that the full impact of my parents' journey and sacrifice became clear to me. Maureen and I had jobs to go to. We only had to travel 300 kilometres to start our new life in Canberra, and we had a house and savings. And at that time, no children. My parents had nothing, just the clothes on their backs, and they simply walked out of Hungary in very dangerous circumstances, with 3 children under 8, and set their sights on a destination 20,000 kilometres away, to a country they knew nothing about, except it was free and far from the terror of communism.
My husband died in 1992, and it is as a widow that I have now lived these years since. But hardly a day passes that I do not thank God for the blessing that He gives us. The nightmares are still there for me about the hundreds and hundreds of innocent souls who lost their life on that tragic day at Parliament at Kossuth Square on 25 October 1956. I can't never forget them.